Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and this is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD. In this live webinar, you get to ask questions about Lyme disease, and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. Together, I think we can find some ways to help improve health, or at least get some good answers for you, too. I am making a recording of the webinar tonight, and tomorrow morning, I will send you an email somewhere around 6 to 6:30 a.m. Seattle time, which is a Pacific Standard Time. And so take a look out for that. In that email, you'll have a link to the recording of tonight's webinar. You'll also be able to click on a link to sign up for next week's webinar as well, too. So I'm doing 3 webinars in a row now. This is the first of a 3-part series. So again, I'd appreciate if you'd sign up for that so I have an idea of how many people are showing up. There are no limits to the number of people that can attend these, but it's always good for me to have an idea in advance of how many people I'm going to be talking with and working with. For those of you that are new to the webinars, you create them with your questions. So where you can give questions to me is over here on the right-hand side over there. There's a chat box. Write your question to me in that chat box. Be aware that each time you hit the enter key, that sends a question to me. So I ask that you just write these as a big, long run-on question. Each time that you do actually hit that enter key, it creates a separate question. That gets very difficult for me to follow the parts of your question on my side, okay? During the webinar, I will be posting your questions so that people can read them on their screen. I'm also going to read those questions. And the reason that I'm going to read those questions is that in the recorded version, sometimes it's hard to see those questions. So I want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to hear those questions too. Okay? All right. So without any further ado, one last thing. To those of you that are back here again, glad to see you. And I'm very glad to see a number of new names showing up on my board here this evening as well too. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. Hello, Dee. Let's see. I tested positive for Bartonella through Galaxy. That's Galaxy Labs, everyone. The IFA was 1 to 256. Negative for Lyme through Armin Ellisbot. Negative for all other co-infections tested. Awaiting Babesia decani through IGeneX. I have many Lyme and or Babesia symptoms too. Pain, profound fatigue, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome. The list goes on. Let's see. But it is possible it could also be Bartonella I am dealing, but is it possible it could also be just Bartonella I'm dealing with? Or could I also be dealing with Lyme? No known EM rash or known tick bite. My sister had cat scratch disease when I was little. Thanks for all that you do. Okay, so a little bit of a long question, but I'll try to break it into parts, okay? So first of all, the test that D that you had, and everyone, the test that D had done, that is a Bartonella test. That IFA is a way of seeing if your immune system has developed antibodies that attach to the Bartonella infection, okay? And that test did come back positive. The only thing I don't know, I assume this is the IgG antibody IFA that came back positive. So when we get antibodies against an infection, we first develop one family called IgM, and then usually around 6 weeks to 3 months, those will go away and they get replaced with a family of antibodies called IgG. Okay, that's what happens in any infection, except in Lyme. For some reason with Lyme, we don't see the progression from IgM changing over to becoming IgG. It just doesn't happen regularly. Maybe about 80% of the time that I'm diagnosing somebody with Lyme, and they've had it in them for a year or more, they're still making IgMs, even though they're not supposed to, okay? There's a reason we think that happens, but just be aware in all other infections, though, IgGs develop. Once you develop IgGs, they're the memory of the immune system. They don't go away even once an infection is out of you, okay? So just having an elevated IFA IgG test, which I think this is probably an IgG, does not prove the germ is active in you. We have to decide if it is active in you based on what your symptoms tell us, okay? So first of all, that's one point I wanted to make, okay? Secondly, it is possible to get Bartonella and not have Lyme. It's also possible to get Babesia and not have Lyme, okay? The one thing I want to raise with you, though, is that our testing, even out of Armin Labs, is not perfect for Lyme. Now, Armin does this test called an ELISpot for Lyme. And what an ELISpot is, it's a method we can use to see if a type of white blood cell called a T cell. T cells are the kind of white blood cells that actually fight infections. They'll gobble up germs in a sense, okay? When T cells in our body are exposed to germs that they recognize, they release a group of chemicals called cytokines, right? And many of you are familiar with me talking about cytokines. I talk about cytokines every time we do one of these webinars, but cytokines basically are chemicals made by white blood cells when they see a germ, and they're designed to turn the immune system on. In Lyme disease, however, they get made in excess, and they wind up giving you most of your symptoms. Okay, so most of your symptoms in Lyme disease are excess cytokine symptoms, okay? But we can measure some of these cytokines. And what the ELISpot does is it takes your T cells that they draw from your blood, and then they expose it to some proteins from Lyme. Armin, I think, uses 3 proteins in its test. And then they see, do you release certain cytokines? And if your T cells do release those cytokines in the test, that means your T cells recognize Lyme, okay? Now, Armin claims through some information they've sent me that their ELISpot can find Lyme about 85% of the time. So that means it can miss it about 15% of the time. Okay, so keep that in mind. It may not be a perfect test. The only test I think that is probably better than the ELISpot test these days, well, 2 tests. One is I like the Western blot test out of IGeneX, which has a track record of finding Lyme if present about 80-85% of the time. Okay, and then IGeneX has a new test, which is kind of a derivative of a Western blot, another way of looking for antibodies made against Lyme called the immunoblot. And that test has the ability to find Lyme about 90% of the time. So that, I think, is probably where I'm going to start doing a lot more of my testing, is on this new test developed by IGeneX, okay? But the point I want to raise with you is, even though your ELISpot from Armin was negative, it doesn't prove you don't have Lyme, unfortunately, okay? And then the last point I want to make about testing is, I know you've got testing awaiting the Babesia-Decannae antibody test from IGeneX. The trouble with Babesia and even with Bartonella is our testing is not that reliable. And it's very possible for both of those to have them too and have negative testing, okay? And so what happens with Bartonella, for instance, we estimate there's 30 strains, and we can only test for 2. It just so happens one of yours did come back positive, okay? You're positive against one of the strains, all right? For Babesia, we estimate somewhere between 15 and 20 strains, and we can really only test well for 2, all right? So it's possible to have Babesia and still have negative testing, okay? So how do I figure out what people got? So first of all, the fact that there is a positive test that you have against Bartonella says, yeah, you probably got Bartonella there, especially if you have a lot of Bartonella symptoms, okay? All right, and even though you can have Bartonella separate from Lyme, it does raise suspicion that you might have been bit by a tick, although cats can give it to through cat scratches. That was the point that you raised there, okay? But it just raises that suspicion, okay? All right, so how do you figure out if somebody has Lyme? Well, you look at 4 things. You look at what are the risk factors of getting it, which a no tick bite is a high risk factor, especially if it occurs in New England where a lot of ticks carry Lyme out there, okay? Are you a hiker, backpacker, et cetera? You're going to need to think about, do you get exposed to ticks, okay? Second thing that we consider is, what are the symptoms? Do you have enough symptoms that look like Lyme? Third thing we consider is, are there any physical exam findings? Often there aren't many. The fourth thing we look at is there a supportive test, okay? So if you've got a lot of symptoms that look like Lyme and there's not another reasonable explanation for it, I would probably treat for Lyme, all right? And then finally, for Babesia, again, we consider what the symptoms tell us about that, okay? All right, so where can you find information that helps you figure out if you have Babesia based on symptoms and Bartonella based on symptoms? I'm going to show you an article that I've written about that here in a second. I need to see if I also answered your question here. I've been rambling on here. Just a minute here. Let's see. I'm just looking again here. So to answer your question, it could be just Bartonella on its own. It might be Lyme and Bartonella. You've got to look ultimately at what the symptoms tell you. Do you have a lot of symptoms of Bartonella? Do you have a lot of symptoms of Lyme? Do you have a lot of symptoms of Babesia? And make your decisions based on what those symptoms tell you. Okay. All right. And that's because our testing isn't perfect, even the ELISpot out of Armin Labs. Okay. All right. Now, I'm going to do a quick screen share here. I've done on Lyme disease, and collectively there's so many of them now that I just call a book. It is available online only, though. Okay, I wanted to write a resource that people could find when they're laying down, just wanting to search something up and not having to go buy a book to do it. Okay, so everything is here, and I've organized things into chapters. And so, if you're wondering, could it be, could it be Lyme, or could it be Babesia, or could it be Bartonella? You might want to take a look at this chapter here called How to Diagnose. And I would take a look at number one. Let's see. Here's the article I've written on how to diagnose Babesia, which says don't rely on the tests, rely on the symptoms. And I go through all the symptoms of it, okay? In terms of Bartonella, take a look at this article. It could be Bartonella Babesia. If you have enough of those symptoms, think that you might have Bartonella. And then finally, I have a 15-minute video on how to diagnose Lyme. It's called How to Diagnose Chronic Lyme Disease More Than a Test. And I actually have a more updated video that will be getting posted here to replace this old one. Probably in the next week or so, I'll be getting that posted up. Okay? All right. Let me go back here. That's having a hard time finding my way back here again. Okay, so D, I hope that gives you some insights, okay? All right. All right. Hello, Bobby. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I have had some recent co-infection testing with some odd results. Babesiosis antibody IgG at 1 to 16 positive, IgM 1 to 20 positive, Ehrlichia antibody IgG 164 to 128 questionable, 256 positive on the IgM. Well, it's going to be easier for me just to read to look at this instead of reading it out loud. All right, let's see. My doctor sent me a letter stating everything was fine. He is not a Lyme literate medical doctor, or other usual blood work was fine. Test results for Borrelia not back and Bart not done. Do you think everything is okay? If not okay, how would you treat? I've been treated in the past with doxine rifampin for 4 to 5 months. Okay, bear with me here. I have to go back and look at the list of what the tests that you had again. Let's see. Co-infection. Babesia, IgG. So that IgG on your Babesia is weakly positive. It's not strongly positive, okay? IgM, weakly positive. Ehrlichia, I would say, is weakly positive. And the anaplasma. Okay, so the way I would interpret this is those are all, you have antibodies against those infections. Those are tick-borne infections, okay? And you have antibodies against a number of infections that come from ticks, okay? So it says to me that you've been exposed, and therefore there is a chance of even having Lyme too. What would I do in terms of treating? Well, I would have to ask you what your symptoms are, because I would decide what I'm going to treat based on what your symptoms tell me. Because your antibody reactions, many of these are actually weakly positive, so it doesn't prove to me that they are there or not. But I would want to know more about, do you have fatigue? Do you have joint pain? Do you have body pain? I would go through the list of symptoms about Bartonella to tease out, is there Bartonella part of this? I would go through the list of symptoms regarding Babesia to figure out, are there symptoms of it? Now, notice I'm not saying to go through the symptom list of anaplasma or Ehrlichia. And the reason is if you've been treated for at least 2 weeks of doxycycline somewhere in the past, you probably have taken care of those. That this is just old stuff showing up, okay? But I would go based on symptoms to look and figure out if there's Babesia, Lyme, or Bartonella active. And if there are, I would treat. if you want some of my help figuring out what I would treat, I need a lot more information. I'd have to ask you. And probably the easiest way to do that, let me just do a screen share here so I can show you this. Go ahead and click on that, and you're going to find information about my consult service, okay? And basically, I explain it here, but essentially, so look at this page. I talk about how do you reach us. It's using an email that we have here or calling up and talking to Christine, who's my receptionist, all right? But basically, the way that usually an hour with you because it's a very complicated problem, Lyme is, and I need to get a lot of information from you. And then I can give you recommendations based on what your symptoms tell me and what your interests are too. So some people that visit with me only want to use herbs, for instance, or some want to use prescription antibiotics. And I can make recommendations based on whatever direction you want to go. Because I don't get to actually examine you, my medical board will not let me prescribe for you, though. That's the only problem with these consults. And but if there are things that need to be prescribed, sometimes doctors will prescribe after they read the note that I write from the visit, because they'll feel comfortable prescribing based on the recommendations of a Lyme literate medical doctor like myself. And they'll prescribe even though they may not be knowledgeable enough. They will still prescribe. Okay, so I can give you some insights if you would like to sign up for one of those one-to-one medical consults. I'd be glad to help figure this out with you. Okay, all right. Let me go back here. Thank you for that question, Bobby, and good luck to you. Hello, Gary. Let's see. Do you recommend broccoli seed extract or olive leaf extract? So, Gary, I'm not familiar with broccoli seed extract in terms of something that I have used before. Yes, I do work with olive leaf extract, and the primary reason that I work with olive leaf extract is I like using it in my regimens where I'm treating for chronic virus infections. If I've made a decision to treat for chronic virus infections, my protocol for treating for chronic viruses incorporates olive leaf extract. I think it's one of the better herbs that we can use to treat chronic virus infections. Okay. For more information about when do you decide you're going to treat chronic viruses, how you diagnose chronic viruses, and what regimen I recommend, I'm just going to do a quick screen share here. You can look at the article later on that. Let's see here. Treatment plans chapter. And there is an article I have, when and how to treat chronic viruses. Okay. So I take a look at that. Now, the issue with chronic viruses is even though many people will body testing that they've tested positive to, many people have chronic viruses living in them. Healthy people have chronic viruses living in them, okay? And if you were to pull 100 healthy people off the street, you would find about 10 to 15, maybe 20% that would have elevated IgG antibodies made against those chronic viruses. These are healthy people, okay? So just the fact that you have a chronic virus in you does not mean it causes problems. And in fact, in most people, it doesn't, because our immune systems do what they're supposed to do. They keep a germ under control. And they keep the germ under control by making IgG antibodies, all right? Because remember I said IgGs are what your immune system makes. That's the memory of the immune system. It's what it uses to keep germs under control, all right? Now, many of my colleagues will go ahead and say, oh, you've got elevated IgGs against viruses, let's treat them. And I don't do that. And the reason I don't do that is because it may be that you're making IgGs because your body is keeping the germ under control, okay? Now, I don't treat chronic viruses up front if I have elevated IgGs, not at the beginning of a treatment, because I believe if you get the Lyme germ under control by doing things to treat it, that the immune system will step in and eventually get those chronic viruses under control. Okay, but if you're about 6 to 9 months into treatment and you're not improving, looking for chronic viruses is something I will do. And I might do the IgG testing, but my preferred way of testing for it is to get a test, an experimental test called a nagalase. A nagalase is an enzyme that is made in the covering of viruses. Its purpose is to deactivate part of the immune system, actually. But if you wind up using, if you get a nagalase and it's elevated, it can suggest that those chronic viruses are not being kept under control by the immune system anymore, and they've gotten active. But again, I'm not going to consider treating them until I'm about 6 to 9 months into treatment, because often the steps that I recommend to get your Lyme under control and to get your cytokines knocked down, all those things are going to help your immune system to start working better. And you may never need to use something like an olive leaf extract or reishi mushrooms that I recommend, transfer factors that I recommend. Again, take a look in my article about how to treat for those specific recommendations. So anyhow, that's the issue about viruses. There's controversy as to whether you should treat them or not. And what I say is I agree there's controversy. I don't even think about doing anything about them until you're about 6 to 9 months into treatment. Okay? All right. Thanks for that question. Let's see. I think I answered part of that question. I'm not sure what to do with that part. I think, Bobby, we talked a few minutes ago. Oh, that's right. I answered that generally with the last response I gave you. Okay, let me get rid of that. Hello, Tara. Let's see. CDC diagnosed. I think what Tara's saying is that her Western blot was CDC positive. Okay. Again, a Western blot is a method we use to see do you have antibodies that are attaching to proteins found on the covering of the Lyme germ? And there's a certain pattern we look for on that. Okay. And she met the CDC pattern, the criterion that CDC says. Started with treatment with doxycycline, and within 2 days of not being able to get off the floor, started treatment with Doxy within 2 days of not being able to get off the floor. Doxy didn't help. Admitted, started on IV Rocephin, did that for 3 or so months. Lyme literate medical doctor did a C6 peptide test and was 0.12. Still have quad weakness, toothache pains in legs. Took Cipro for UTI and nerve pain lessened. Is there a second part to your question here, Tara? Bear with me. I'm trying to see. Let's see. All symptoms seem neuro. Unnerving sensation in Latin extremities. It's awful. Heel pain. But again, lessen with Cipro. LLMD continues to say Lyme is gone. Okay, so Tara, this may be a situation where you want to actually do one of those one-to-one consults with me so I can help sort this out with you as well too. But let me make a few points. We do not have a done test in Lyme. Okay, there isn't such a thing as a test that says we're done. And so, for instance, I know Armin at Armin Labs and his ELISpot says that if the ELISpot's negative, it means the germ isn't there. And the reason that Armin says that is T cells. Again, the ELISpot's measuring, do your T white blood cells react to Lyme? T cells live in us for about 2 months and then they die. All right. So if you've got the only way that you can keep having T cells in you that respond or react to a Lyme is if they are newer within the last 2 months, meaning Lyme has been within you within the last 2 months, okay? At least that's the idea, all right? However, the problem is Lyme likes to hide sometimes, and it can sequester itself deep in tissues where the blood doesn't go and doesn't get easily seen, or it goes into joints, or it hides on nerve coverings. So because Lyme can hide, it can sequester itself. Sometimes even the ELISpot will be negative, even though Lyme is in you. Okay, and that Lyme that's hiding in you still is creating irritation within the whole body and the immune system as well too. Okay, all right. That same idea of Lyme sequestering and hiding means that that the Western blot sometimes may not be positive even if the germ is in you, for instance. Okay. So we don't have a truly done test in Lyme. There is no such thing. Even though I know some of my colleagues will do the ELISpot, for instance, or he might even be doing the C6 ELISA, that is not going to accurately capture it if it's sequestered and hiding. Or if you have so much immune suppression that the immune system can't react. That's another time that you're going to have negative testing and the germ can still be in you, okay? So there isn't negative testing, okay? Second point, the fact that you got somewhat better on Cipro makes me wonder about Bartonella, actually. So Cipro is part of a family of antibiotics called the fluoroquinolones. The other major member of that family is something called levaquin. Levaquin happens to be one of the strongest antibiotics we have for Bartonella. However, I tend not to use it because it can lead to tendon inflammation and even tendon rupture in limited percent of the time, like maybe 1% of the time or so. Okay, but I don't use it for that reason. But Cipro is its brother sister, and Cipro can treat for Bartonella too. Nerve pain is not only a symptom that is associated with Lyme, it can be associated with Bartonella. Okay. So what would make me think about Bartonella? Let me go through the list of Bartonella symptoms. I showed everyone an article earlier tonight. You can read about them, but let me just talk about it real quick. So it's very common often that people with Bartonella will have cognitive impairment, number one. Okay, Lyme can cause that too, but Bartonella can too. Cognitive impairment being thinking problems, okay? Second thing that people with Bartonella often can have is pain on the balls of the feet, right down on the bottom of the feet, usually worse in the morning. It's something that sometimes you can walk off as the day goes on. Sometimes people with Bartonella will have a rash that looks like stretch marks or scratch marks in areas that are non-stretch mark areas. Okay, so you might want to consider that. Bartonella is known for giving a lot of neuropathies and neurologic hypersensitivity. So like sound sensitivity, light sensitivity, touch sensitivity. That makes me think about Bartonella sometimes. Bladder issues. So people having a lot of burning on urination or urge to pee, and they get urine testing done to look for bladder infection, and it doesn't show a bladder infection. Think Bartonella. Okay, that's what Bartonella does, is it actually leads to inflammation of the lining of the bladder, okay? Think of Bartonella if you have got a lot of anxiety or depression, and think of Bartonella if you have abdominal pain for which you can't explain or reason for it. And then finally, think of Bartonella, well, actually not finally. Think of Bartonella also if you happen to have a lot of air hunger, or feel like you can't get enough air in from time to time. Possibly increased day sweats make me think about Bartonella. And Bartonella can trigger restless legs, which is a feeling of things crawling on your legs. So you got to move your legs around constantly, okay? So if you've got a number of those symptoms of Bartonella, it may mean you've got Bartonella, okay? So 2 points out of your question here. Number one, there is not a done test. And I just disagree with my colleagues that actually think that they can say that Lyme is gone based on a test. We don't have such a thing, okay? And that's because Lyme can hide where it can't be seen, or Lyme seen by the immune system, or Lyme suppresses the immune system in a way that it can't react. Okay, so there is not a done test. Okay, number two, when you get a lot of neurologic symptoms, think Bartonella, and the fact that you responded to Cipro makes me wonder. Think about all those symptoms that I just said, and if you have a number of those, it may mean that you've got Bartonella. Okay, all right. Good luck to you. Hello, Tracy. Let's see. Happy New Year, Dr. Russ. Happy New Year to you too. Thanks for all you do. You're welcome. Let's see. Have you ever seen or heard anything about anaplasmosis relapsing? Vets are supposedly seeing this happen in dogs in the Great Lakes area, but nothing I can find about it in humans. I had it for 6 months before I was treated. I'm not familiar with it. I tend to think of anaplasmosis and Ehrlichia. I tend to think of both of those as being germs that are relatively easy to get rid of, actually, and that they will respond usually with about 2 weeks to 4 weeks or so of a tetracycline. That's how I tend to think of them. I don't think of them as relapsing, okay? Now, those germs are known for, Ehrlichia and Anaplasma are known for giving a lot of myalgia muscle pains. They're often known for giving increased body temps, like up in the 101 degree range, for instance, too. So if you happen to have a lot of myalgias, increased body temperatures might be something to think about. But generally, I just don't tend to see it as a relapsing, and I tend to see it as something that's fairly easy to clear. Okay, that's been what my experience has been. All right. Thanks for that question, Tracy. Good luck to you. Hello, Vicky. Happy New Year, Dr. Russ. Same to you. My question is about tinnitus, or called tinnitus. Either way, you can say tinnitus or tinnitus. I've had chronic Lyme for at least 6 years. However, in November, I started experiencing tinnitus. I'm wondering what triggered it and how to relieve it. Will it ever go away? All right, so tinnitus, or tinnitus, everyone, means ringing or buzzing in the ears. It's a sensation that you hear. Now, it happens to people without Lyme too. Okay, so maybe this has come on because it was going to come on separate from infection. It also can be a sign that of nerve injury in the inner ear from Lyme. Okay, so I don't know why it would have come on now. It could be that maybe it is a result of having had Lyme in you, or it could be that it was something that was going to occur anyhow. Okay. Now, in conventional medicine, we really don't have good treatments for it. There isn't such a thing. Okay, the only thing we know in conventional medicine, that's not alternative medicine, but in conventional medicine, is that if you decrease caffeine intake or you decrease alcohol intake, that seems to help. Okay, those are the things we know from conventional medicine. Okay, now in alternative medicine, there are some approaches that you might want to try. Number one, you might want to try to use ginkgo biloba. So many of you know ginkgo biloba as the herb you use for Alzheimer's or thinking problems. The way that it works in that disorder is it makes your red blood cells more flexible so that they will flow more easily into very narrow blood vessels, okay? All right. And maybe it helps with thinking and Lyme sometimes. I don't find that to be the case, but it does seem to help with tinnitus. And the way that I would dose it is ginkgo biloba, 80 milligrams for an adult twice a day. I'd give it about a 2-month trial to see if it makes a difference, okay? And again, if you're drinking caffeine, try to cut that down. And also, if you're drinking alcohol, try to knock that down too, okay? Second thing that can sometimes be helpful is to couple that with some acupuncture. And if you happen, there are some good acupuncturists that can make a difference with that. If you happen to be in the Seattle area, who I would recommend for that is an acupuncturist who's a friend of mine too. A gentleman named Randy Clare does a style of acupuncture called Japanese style acupuncture. In Japanese acupuncture, they don't put the needles deeply in, it just barely gets under the skin surface, okay? And he is up in Shoreline, just north of Seattle. So if you happen to be listening in from the Seattle area, you're looking for a good acupuncturist that understands Lyme, number one, and also can help with situations like that, I would consider him. And then the third thing to consider, sometimes it can be helpful for this, is to do a type of osteopathic manipulation called craniosacral therapy, which involves either somebody trained in it. They're usually going to be osteopathic physicians or some medical doctors that have gotten trained on it on the side. I've been trained in it. Or a massage therapist or physical therapist sometimes will do it too. But it's a specific type of technique where you put light pressure on the various bones of the head in a certain order, and it creates changes within the neurologic transmission up in the brain, and sometimes can help be a very effective a way of treating for nerve irritation up in the head or even in the ear, okay? So I would consider ginkgo biloba. I would consider getting acupuncture. You might consider doing craniosacral therapy as well too. And again, the tinnitus that developed in you might just be what was going to happen anyhow, or it may be a consequence of Lyme starting to be active or involving your inner ear. Okay? All right. Or your hearing nerve, I should say. Okay. Thanks for that question, Vicki. Good luck to you. Hello, Jackie. Let's see. Happy 2018, doctor, and all. Happy New Year to you too. I don't know if by and all. Oh, I think you mean everyone in the webinar. That's okay. I got it. All right. After 25 years of untreated Lyme, Babesia, and BART, I took 6 weeks of Doxy last summer for a recent tick bite. Final day on Doxy, I went into a dreamlike state and was swiftly knocked out for several minutes from a seizure. No seizures prior. I assume this was a herx. You felt it. Let's see. Was possibly from BART. I recently saw a neurologist who is wonderful but not a Lyme specialist. She feels 2 additional times when I was into dreamlike state while standing were also seizures. All incidents were during doxy. I'm not on any meds currently. 1 week ago, I was in the store when I went. Let's see, there's another part here. When I went into a strong dream state for 2 to 3 minutes, I realized this should not be. I pulled myself together, felt warm, and removed my coat and told others slight chance I may have a seizure. I was fine. Do you feel this may be a type of seizure? Let's see. Could doxy in July aggravated Lyme or worsening one or both? Okay, so I do agree that this dreamlike state that you get into could be a manifestation of a seizure. I do agree that that could be happening. My comments, I think, when you asked me a question about this in the past, I can't remember the exact question you asked, but I vaguely remember this from one of our previous webinars, is I said that when you have a seizure-like disorder in Lyme disease, think that Bartonella might be there, okay? Because Bartonella can give more, coupled with Lyme, gives more extreme manifestations of neurologic symptoms in Lyme, or could be the whole cause of some of those neurologic symptoms too, okay? And the other comment I may have made that and that you should be aware of too is the seizure activity that you get in Lyme and in Bartonella often doesn't show up on an EEG. So I would call it seizure-like activity. A lot of people will look at you and think you're crazy, right? That you're making it all up. But I think it's real. I just think that the EEG is not connecting or collecting the information in a way that works for somebody with Lyme disease, basically, okay? What I have found in treating people with Lyme, if I don't also treat Bartonella at the same time, I often am not going to be able to get rid of those seizures when they're happening. If I do treat for Bartonella as part of the Lyme treatment, I can get rid of those seizures quite often, most of the time. Okay? All right. So those are just some thoughts for you to think about. I don't know for sure why things got exacerbated on the doxy before. I will tell you one of the problems with using doxy just by itself for Lyme is that it may promote the growth of cyst Lyme, and which then can come back and even get more. So again, there's 3 forms of the Lyme germ. Let me clarify that. So Lyme lives as a spirochete that looks like a corkscrew. You've seen pictures of that probably on the internet. It also lives inside of your cells as something called intracellular Lyme, and it can live in a microscopic cyst form. All right. When you put pressure on certain forms by using antibiotics that only treat those forms, that will cause some of those germs to turn into the other one. It can morph. This germ's amazing. It can actually morph into another form, okay? So doxy is great at treating intracellular Lyme and spirochete Lyme, but it doesn't treat cysts, and in fact, it can cause a lot of cysts to develop. And so if you're not covering for cyst forms, they then, after you stop the doxycycline, can pop back into spirochete and pop back into intracellular Lyme, all right? So what do you use on doxycycline that treats cysts? Well, there's a good herb for that. It's called grapefruit seed extract, 250 milligrams, 1 pill twice a day. Okay, that's something to consider. Also, there's a variety of antibiotics that treat cysts. Those are metronidazole, tinidazole, rifampin can treat cyst. And apparently, a biocidin, an herbal product that I've mentioned a couple webinars ago, that has a number of herbs, and including garlic, raspberry, lavender oil, tea tree oil, rosemary oil, echinacea, golden seal, shiitake. I mean, it's a very powerful herbal product. According to Petri dish experiments, treats all 3 forms of the Lyme germ and even removes biofilms. Okay, so that's something else that you could think of for using for cyst Lyme. And the herbs Banderol Cemento, those 2 herbs that I like recommending as a comprehensive Lyme germ treatment that can work as well as prescription antibiotics for Lyme. Banderol Cemento, also known as cat's claw and otoba bark extract. Those 2 products can work as well as prescription antibiotics. They treat all 3 forms, including the cyst form of the Lyme germ too. Okay? Anyhow, those are my ramblings. I know I ramble sometimes, but I hope that gives you some useful information there. Okay? All right. Good luck to you. Okay? Let's see. bear with me here. I'm trying to clean. So a lot of these questions were in parts. I'm trying to get back to some questions that are new. Let's see here. Hello, CJ. Thank you, Dr. Ross. What is the benefit of coffee enemas? Would coffee suppositories work just as well? Do you recommend any brands? Thank you. All right. So coffee enemas are useful for detox, but aren't necessary in everyone. Let me just start by saying that, okay? So so your intestine is an organ of detox, your kidneys are an organ of detox, and your liver is an organ of detox, all right? So things that are fat-soluble toxins that are in us, and these are toxins that we develop just through normal chemical reactions. As part of chemical reactions in our bodies, we can develop toxins. We also breathe in toxins from the environment, for instance. We touch toxins, they get absorbed into our skin. Lyme releases toxins, and that gets in us too, okay? Those are all fat-based toxins. And those toxins get moved to the liver. And inside the liver, those fat-based toxins are transformed into water-based toxins, all right? And the main chemical that does that, or it's involved in that, is glutathione. Many of you from our webinars know about me talking about glutathione and its benefits in this disorder, okay? Now, when in the act of taking the fat-based toxins into water-based toxins in the liver, there's actually a chemical group added onto the toxins that makes it water-based, okay? So it's the water-soluble group, all right? Now, those toxins and these water-based toxins that have that extra chemical added onto them go out into the intestines, and if you're having regular bowel movements, they're going to go out with your poop and get pooped out, all right? The trouble is, if you're not having regular bowel movements, if you're constipated, if you're having maybe less than one a day, for instance, with that slower transit time through the intestines, the longer it takes to go through the intestines, that allows for bacteria that live in the intestines to eat off some of those water-soluble chemical groups. And then those toxins become fat-soluble again, and they get reabsorbed back into your bloodstream, okay? You can't get rid of them, all right? So one thing you have to make sure of to promote regular detox, you got to have bowel movements, all right? Now, one way to do that is coffee enemas, because the act of doing an enema stimulates the muscles in the intestines, causing contraction of those muscles that will then move poop through, okay? Also, the tannins in coffee are irritating to the lining of the intestines. That causes the muscles that are below the surface of the intestines to contract and squeeze things through, okay? So one benefit of coffee enemas is they help you poop, so you're moving your toxins out, all right? Now, are there other ways to poop? Yeah, I mean, one good way to poop is have a lot of fiber. Another way to poop is have somewhere between 400 to 600 milligrams a day of magnesium at nighttime. And if that's not good enough to get regular bowel movements, have a lot of vitamin C. Vitamin C comes in 1,000 milligram pills. When you start getting around 6,000 to 10,000 milligrams a day, people often get loose stools, okay? So if you're wanting an easier way to get bowel movements than having to do enemas, you might consider doing a lot of magnesium and vitamin C if you need to add that, okay? All right. Now, there's one other thing, though, that happens with coffee enemas, and that is that there are chemicals in the coffee that can sometimes turn on excretion of those toxins out of the liver, all right? Now, do I think that's a big factor that it turns the liver on just a little bit more? I don't think so. I know a lot of people do the enemas. I think that the majority of that benefit is actually they cause you to poop. And I think there's easier ways to do that than doing the coffee enemas, all right? Let's see. I don't know, and I don't know whether coffee suppositories are going to give you as good of a bowel movement chance as the coffee enemas. I just don't know that for sure. But anything that stimulates your rectum, whether it's putting liquid up or putting a pill in there, is going to act as an irritant that's going to get the muscles that line your intestines to squeeze and start pushing stuff through, okay? So it could help. All right. Good luck, TJ. Oh, one critical thing to think about with your detox is you've got to have enough liquid to have those bowel movements too, okay? So in addition to magnesium, vitamin C I talked about, or doing your coffee enemas, you want to make sure you're having adequate amounts of liquid. Now, a good amount of liquid, water is what I'm talking about, not coffee, but water that you drink, a good amount to promote detox is to take your weight, your ideal body weight, what would be a good weight for you, okay? Divide that by 2. So take that weight in pounds and divide it in 2. And whatever that number is the number of ounces of water that you should drink a day. All right. So, for instance, a 150-pound guy or woman, guy or woman, you would divide that by 2, and that would be 75. They should be drinking 75 ounces of water a day. That's a lot of liquid, but that is what promotes great detox by getting your mushy stools so things go through. Also, that amount of liquid helps your kidneys to keep flushing toxins out that are water-soluble toxins there too. Okay? All right. So good luck to you, CJ. Thank you for that question. Hello, Allison. Let's see here. Hold on here just a minute. I got to have some liquid here. Let's see. I was diagnosed by Immunosciences blood tests with 4 strains. They test of Lyme, Babesia, Bartonella, and Ehrlichiosis. Also by LabCorp for active Epstein-Barr virus. Also parasites and heavy metals. Is there an order that these must be treated or can all at the same time? This is a flare-up. Let me see if there's a second part to your question I can find here. Let's see, the EBV was active via IgM. I tested positive for Lyme via Western blot at LabCorp 6 years ago. Okay, let me go back here. All right, so in terms of how I would stage things, if these are all active, and again, I don't diagnose or tell somebody they have active infections just on testing, okay? Because testing can be wrong. So if you had enough symptoms suggesting all of these conditions, and I know you have testing that supports that, but again, testing can be wrong. So you still have to have symptoms that also suggest these various infections. The way that I would treat, I'd probably go for your Lyme and Bartonella first and the Ehrlichia. And the way I would do that is the Lyme, I would use a tetracycline because that can treat spirochete Lyme and intracellular Lyme. And it would pick up your ehrlichiosis too. Okay, so you get 2 for 1 with that one, okay? I would also, for the Lyme, use some grapefruit seed extract. Well, actually, I probably wouldn't do grapefruit seed extract. I would use also for Lyme and for Bartonella, rifampin. And the reason I would use that is for Lyme, doxy treats intracellular Lyme, spirochete Lyme. The rifampin treats the cyst form of Lyme. Okay, so you can use those 2 antibiotics to pick up all forms of your Lyme germ. The Bartonella, rifampin is one of the best antibiotics we have, and doxycycline helps it. Okay, so you got a full Bartonella treatment there too. And generally, I like to treat for Bartonella with at least 2 antibiotics. Sometimes if it's really a difficult case, I will do 3 antibiotics, okay? All right. That's where I would start. Okay, now, the reason I didn't say to go after Babesia right away is if you don't clear Bartonella first and you try to go for Babesia first, it can make it harder to get rid of Bartonella. At least that was an observation of Burrascano. I don't know if many of you remember the name Burrascano, but Burrascano was one of the pioneers of Lyme treatment in the country. And he taught many of us, including myself. I learned from him through lectures and everything. But what he noticed in his practice in New York State is if he didn't get Bartonella out first, he tried to go for Babesia first before he cleared Bart. It made it hard to get Bartonella out. Okay, so that's why I'm saying to go for that first. And you get about 4 months or so into this treatment, and if you're doing better, then I would add in treatment for Babesia. You may not even need to treat the active Epstein-Barr virus. And the reason you may not need to treat that is by getting your Lyme under control, your immune system may get active enough to put that Epstein-Barr virus under control. I would not think about treating for it until you're probably about 6 to 9 months into treatment if you're not getting any better, okay? The heavy metals, I would think about trying to address about 6 to 9 months down the road because my experience is even when they're elevated, treating for them often doesn't create great benefit, and they may not really even be contributing to your problem. Parasites depends on how you've tested positive for those. So did somebody see them, or is somebody doing energetic testing? If they're doing energetic testing for those, like ART testing, I don't fully trust it. It depends on who the tester is, okay? But I don't fully trust it for a lot of people doing it. I would consider treating for parasites if you have less symptoms of, say, intestinal parasites. And by intestinal parasites, what I mean are things that live in your intestines. And symptoms I would think of with that would be either gassiness, bloating, maybe loose stools. Those are kind of situations I might think about going for parasites. If you've got a lot of GI symptoms, I might go for parasites right at the beginning. Do that first for about a month before I go Lyme, Babesia, Bartonella, okay? If you don't have many symptoms and they just happen to find it on testing or doing ART testing, I might hold off until you get through at least your Babesia, Lyme, and Bartonella treatment, all right? All right, those are just some thoughts. The only way I could really give you the best advice would be to ask you lots of questions to figure out what your major symptoms are a little bit better. But those are my thoughts on that. Okay? All right. Good luck to you, Allison. I want to do a quick screen share here because I want to show everyone something. All right. So many of you know that I have written How Do You Address Lyme, okay? And I'm actually in the process. I'm probably going to be changing the name of this protocol. I call it the Successful Treatment Recipe, but no one remembers that. So I'm thinking about changing the name of this protocol to the Ross Lyme Support Protocol, because that's what it is. But anyhow, what I did in this protocol is I wrote down the basic steps you should consider doing in any Lyme treatment, okay? And this is available for free. You don't have to have a subscription to the Treat Lyme site, but it addresses a number of things. Number one, you want to get sleep because sleep restores your immune system, all right? In the next probably 2 to 3 weeks, you're going to see an update on this. I've been gathering information for how I want to update this to give you some different recommendations on what to use. But the idea still is to get sleep, okay? Number 2, you want to work with a diet that promotes health. I like personally doing a paleo diet, and here's the one that I recommend. Number 3, do things to get your cytokines down. Again, cytokines are produced by white blood cells when they see germs. They're designed to turn the immune system on, but if you get too many cytokines, they actually suppress the immune system. So you want to make sure you decrease immune suppression by lowering your cytokines. I like using curcumin. Curcumin comes from the Indian seasoning called turmeric, okay? And it does a great job of lowering cytokines, all right? Number 4, help your body deal with stress by using an herb that helps that stress. I like using ashwagandha for that. Number 5, figure out if you have hormonal problems, and if you do, fix those. Number 6, be on a good multivitamin. Number 7, if you've got yeast active in you, get those out. And I tell you here how to even figure out if they're active, all right? Number 8, treat your Lyme infection. Work on basic detox. Treat Bartonella or Babesia. And as I said, in the order, you should treat Bartonella first before you go after Babesia, okay? Now notice, those are the things I say to do up front. I don't say go after parasites. I don't say look for chronic virus infections. I don't say look to see if you have heavy metals, okay? When do I say you start looking at that? Right down here, part 13. Things to consider doing at 6 months and beyond if you're not getting better, okay? And this is where I focus on specific detox treatments. This is where I talk about chronic viruses, when you might want to go for those. In the detox section, that would be when you start thinking about heavy metals, for instance, okay? But you're going to see there's a number of things I would consider after you do the basic core that are in the Ross Lyme support protocol, okay? All right. So I would take a look at that. Just remind yourself of all these things that I've recommended here. Again, probably by the time I send out the next email update for the Treat Lyme book, which would be in the next 2 or 3 weeks, there will be a rewrite of this article is what my intentions are, okay? All right. Let me go back here. Hello, Pete. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. New to your site. Well, welcome. Let's see. Our 8-year-old son has been treated for Lyme for the past 5 years, antibiotics and generic probiotic. He relapses often and am suspecting yeast. Are the doses you recommend for yeast treatment the same for children? What are your recommendations? Thank you. So, for an 8-year-old, probably talking, I'm just thinking about what the weight of an 8-year-old would be. You're probably talking 70 ish, maybe a little bit more pounds. Um, I would take, if in terms of the doses, nystatin, I would probably, so in terms of the things I recommend that you've seen, number one, nystatin, I would probably do it as a 500,000 international unit pill at one pill twice a day. So half the adult dose. All right. I would do the diflucan at half the adult dose. So that's 100 milligrams. In terms of probiotics, I would still try to do about 50 to 100 billion probiotics a day. All right. If you're going to look at the herbal options I recommend, which is Phytostan or Capri Plus, for instance, those two herbs. For adults, I would do 2 pills twice a day of each of those. For a child of this age and size, most likely, I would do 1 pill twice a day on those. Okay. All right. So basically, you're taking my dosage recommendations and you're making them about half because he's a little under half the size of an average adult 150-pound person. All right. Hope that gives you some ideas there. Let's see. Yeah, I think that answers your question. All right. Good luck to you, Pete. Let's see. Hello, Donna. Let's see. I have eustachian tube and sinus issues like I am in a tunnel for the last 2 years. I have seen ENTs, no infection or fluid. What can I take for this? So, usually with eustachian tube dysfunction. So, eustachian tube, everyone, is a tube that runs from behind the eardrum to the back of the throat. It actually opens up about right here on the inside. It comes through the tonsils, actually. Okay. And the idea with the eustachian tube is that it's supposed to stay open to keep air pressure equal on this side of the eardrum and on the other side of the eardrum. All right. Now, if you get swelling of the skin that lines the eustachian tube, sometimes that will cause the opening to get restricted. In fact, the sides of the tube start touching on each other. And it makes it so that you can't normalize air pressure on both sides of the eardrum and you get this kind of sensation like you're having, okay? But usually there's going to be fluid that built up as part of that. So I'm a little bit perplexed by what you're saying here, okay? The other thing, though, that I have found sometimes is that if you have a feeling of having a full ear, if they can't see any fluid in it, then it's possible that sometimes it can be neurologic symptoms of nerve injury in the ear, actually, can sometimes give you that. So neurolyme can sometimes give you a sensation of that, okay? I'm not sure what it is. I would need to ask you a lot more questions, actually, to help sort it through. But it's it would be hard to have eustachian tube dysfunction and not have fluid built up behind the ear. So I would start wondering about neurologic injury to the main nerve of the ear, giving you that sensation, and make sure you're treating your Lyme adequately. Make sure you're treating Bartonella adequately. Okay, this is just some thoughts. All right. Good luck to you, Donna. Hello, Lauren. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Do you have any thoughts about pulse and electromagnetic frequency technologies? Thanks so much, and wishing you a happy 2018. You know, Lauren, I actually got asked a question about this last week too. I'm not. I need to look into this a bit more. I have not been working with those other than knowing people take Rife machines, which is continuous electromagnetic frequency, not pulsed. I'll have to, I don't know enough to answer it here right now. Okay. All right. So I'll have to pass on that question. I said I get stumped every now and then. All right. Hello, Joyce. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Marty. I recently started treatment for, I think you're saying Lyme, but I can't tell by the way that's spelled. It seems that everything I do causes me to herx. I'm taking all the things you suggest for cytokine control, but they are not helping. Even Banderol Cemento at only 1 a day causes me to herx for days. Let's see. I think there's a second part to your question here, Joyce. Also, what do you think about hyperbaric oxygen for Lyme? Thanks. Okay. I'll come back to the hyperbaric question. Let me go to the other question. So, there are some people for which even all the things I recommend to limit herxes don't work. All right, but to be sure, make sure that you're taking in terms of those things. So, what I recommend everyone is curcumin. I mentioned that earlier. It gets inside the white blood cells and limits cytokines from being produced. Okay. When you have a Herxheimer reaction, what happens is the immune system sees toxins in the dead bug parts and increases cytokine production. Cytokines make it so you can't sleep, make you hurt all over, give you fatigue, make it so you can't think. Cytokines give you Lyme symptoms, okay? Really, Lyme symptoms are excess cytokine symptoms, all right? So you want to block production, and a maximum level of the curcumin you might want to consider using, if you're not, is 1,000 milligrams 3 times a day. It comes as a 500 milligram pill. Also, if things aren't working, make sure you're using good quality supplements, okay? So the problem with a lot of supplements, they're garbage. There's a lot of garbage out there. At my store, which is Marty Ross MD Supplements, I have specifically chosen products where I know the manufacturers are doing a good job of putting very active ingredients in there, okay? New York State, there were studies done where I think the Attorney General in New York State went into a variety of supplement stores, pulled stuff off the shelf, and discovered that many of those products just don't even contain what they say they're supposed to, or they're not using the best active ingredients, okay? So if you're going to use supplements and they don't seem like they're working, make sure you're using good brands. And I have chosen the ones I think that are really good brands for patients with Lyme disease. I've chosen them based on effectiveness of ingredients. I trust the manufacturers to put effective ingredients in. I've researched them to know, okay? And the second thing is I've chosen products that tend not to have a lot of artificial fillers that could be harmful to somebody with Lyme. So I'll show you my store here in a minute, but make sure you're using good quality. So if it's not working, check the quality, okay? All right. So I like using a Thorne product called Mariva 500 SF. That SF stands for sunflower oil. They use sunflower oil to microscopically wrap the curcumin to get it absorbed. Turmeric and curcumin that are not microscopically wrapped, or liposomal is what that is called, are not going to get well absorbed. Okay, so make sure you're using a well absorbed product. Look at the Thorne Mariva 500. Do 1,000 milligrams 3 times a day. Also, I would be on glutathione if you're in a difficult situation like this. That has to be a liposomal glutathione as well too. And what I would recommend for that is a product by Research Nutritionals called Trifortify. And they have 2 flavors. One's a watermelon, one is a citrus flavor. Either one's fine. And I would do that at 5 milliliters, which is a teaspoon, twice a day. I'd go really high on that, okay? And then the other thing those are 2 things. Those would be the big things I would consider doing. Okay, maximize both of those out, okay? And if that is still not working, then as you've suggested, go very low on your Banderol Cemento, all right? Now, if you are herxing severely on 1 drop of Banderol Cemento a day, then you need to go lower, all right? I would go lower. And how do you go lower than a drop? Well, you can. And the way you do that is you put your drop in, let's say, 4 ounces of water, okay? All right. And then what you might consider doing is pouring those 4 ounces into 1 ounce containers. And now you have a quarter drop of your herb per container. And you might just dial it back to a quarter drop. I've had to start there. I've had to start at 1/8 of a drop one time with one of my patients that kept herxing the whole time. Okay. So you just got to dial it back to what you can handle. And for some people, that means just microscopic amounts, even 1/8 or a 16th or a quarter drop. Okay. And the way you create your quarter drops again is just put it in a volume. Let's say if you want to do a 16th of a drop, put it in 16 ounces of water, and then pour off 1 ounce. That's a 16th of a drop. Okay. All right. So that's how I would recommend doing that. And again, make sure you're doing good quality products for your cytokine control. All right. So let me do a quick screen share here again. All right. It looks like now, and there's changes coming in about the next week to 2 weeks. I'll be launching a redesigned site that will look a little bit different, but this is what it looks like for now. Okay. And yes, I realize it's hard to find things on my site, so that's why I'm redesigning it. I actually have hired people to redesign it. But anyhow, for right now, what we have is a search bar up here. All right. So if you want to find something like curcumin, just type in curcumin. Let me get that. All right. So, and you'll see that what comes up here is the Thorn Mariva 500. Even Research Nutritionals has a product there, for instance. Okay. What do I consider good quality products? Well, take a look at my by manufacturer. All of these brands that I list here are ones that I have searched out, made sure by dealing with the companies that they are doing a good job of putting pharmacy grade substances in, basically. Okay. All right. So take a look at that. All right. So where are we going here? I'm just going to do I'm going to show you one thing. All right. So this is what my new site's going to eventually look like. I'm still working with the designers to help fix this up. I've got a whole new logo here. I've got a huge search bar that we put across the top, so people, now you'll know what you're seeing, okay? And in the supplements menu, that's going to wind up, let's see what's that going to look like. The supplements menu is going to look like this. So when you click here on supplements, you're going to have a drop down that shows you things by medical problems, and you can hunt by manufacturer as well too. Okay. So I just want to show you this. There's changes coming. I know many of you may have been frustrated by my store in the past, but we're redesigning it, trying to get it so it's much more functional for you. Okay. All right. Let me go back here. Within the next 2 weeks, we'll be launching that. I know that for those that have purchased from my store before, you got a newsletter from me earlier this week where I introduced the new logo. That's been quite a process as well, too. But take a look there. Okay, so my store, anyone can buy from my store. And the guarantee you get from me is that I've done a good job of finding high quality products. Okay, so if you're going to put your money into supplements, everyone, make sure you're not throwing it away on cheap stuff. It probably isn't going to work. All right. All right. Good luck to you, Joyce. Let's see. Hello, Donna. Let's see, I have MTHFR homozygous C677T. That actually is C677T is the gene. And I cannot take B supplements. How do I detox from all the toxins from antibiotics and the spirochetes die off? All right. Okay, so let me explain what MTHFR is and then propose a solution for you. Okay, so MTHFR stands for methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase. That's a mouthful, right? That's an enzyme, all right? So it's called the methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase enzyme, all right? And there are there's a number of genes, but there's two that we focus on that help program genetically whether that enzyme is going to be formed correctly or be deformed, okay? All right, and those two genes are C677T and a gene, genetic material called the A1298C gene, okay? All right, now we get, of each gene that we have, we get a component from our mom and we get a component from our dad. If we have a defect in a gene, homozygous defect means that both the mom part and the dad part were abnormal. That's what a homozygous means, okay? Heterozygous means that either the mom part or the dad part was deformed, okay? All right, now the worst kind of deformed to have would be homozygous at C677T and at A1298C, all right? But you've got homozygous at one of the positions, so you can there's a good chance that your enzyme, the MTHFR enzyme, has not turned out correctly, okay? So what does it do, all right? So MTHFR helps convert diet folate, the folate that we have in our diet, which is a B vitamin, okay, B folate. It helps convert it from an inactive form into an activated form, okay? And that activated folate is something called 5-methotetrahydrofolate. Okay, it's a methylated form of folate, all right? All right, so if you have a defect in that enzyme that's supposed to govern the conversion of diet folate to the activated folate, you're going to tend not to get enough of that activated folate, okay? You're not going to get none, but you're going to tend not to get enough, all right? So what is activated folate important for? Well, activated folate is up here, and it has to be, so folate has to be activated up here in a bunch of chemical pathways, okay? And there's a number of chemical pathways or steps then that must take place that eventually lead to the production down here at the bottom, way downstream, of glutathione, okay? So glutathione is your master detox chemical, right? Now, you can get more glutathione if you can fix up here by taking B vitamins that are methylated. I like using something called MethylGuard, or you can just do the methylated folate directly by itself, okay? All right, but if you cannot take B vitamins, then what you can do is just give the glutathione, all right? So one option you could consider is just taking glutathione, all right? Now, the beauty of being able to fix up here, if you could take B vitamins, is that also helps some of these more minor detox reactions that lead to glutathione production, okay? So these other chemical reactions through here, these more minor ones, do a little bit of detox, but if you can at least get glutathione in, that's going to help a lot with your detox. So what I would suggest doing is getting some glutathione, all right? And I like, again, using a liposomal variety, as I was talking about earlier. You might consider doing the Trifortify orange or watermelon. Research Nutritional has done a great job. They've got studies that show that those products do actually result in increased glutathione within cells, okay? And so 5 milliliters one time a day is probably what I recommend for you, all right? All right. Good luck to you, Donna. Oh, Donna, as you start, instead of going right to 5 milliliters one time a day, though, as you start unblocking your detox pathways, there's a bunch of toxins that are built up behind that roadblock right now, okay? They're going to come through. And if you open that floodgate up too quickly, what happens is they trigger a bunch of cytokines to surge. So I would probably start at a quarter teaspoon one time a day for about a week, then go up to, if you're not herxing, you don't feel out worse, or you don't feel out worse because of increased cytokines, then you might go up to half a teaspoon a day for a week. If you're tolerating that, okay, 3/4, you tolerate that again, then go all the way up to a full teaspoon, okay? That's how I would approach that, all right? Again, the Research Nutritionals product is called Trifortify. That's the one I like for that. All right. Thank you for that question. Good luck to you. Let's see. I think I answered that one earlier, and I said, no, I don't. Hello. Let's see. Hi, Donna. One more from you. Let's see. My CD57 is at 37. At what level do you feel is acceptable to say I do not have to take antibiotics? To be honest, I don't follow CD57s. I just have, I know some of my, well, let's talk about CD57s first and tell you why I don't bother. So CD57 is a type of white blood cell that is low in active Lyme about 80% of the time. Okay. What's low? I consider anything under 150. So at 37, it's low. Okay. So it's considered low about 80% of the time in active Lyme. All right. So a number of my colleagues, especially years ago, used to think that during a Lyme treatment, if somebody was getting better, as we had less immune suppression from Lyme, that we should slowly see those CD57s rise, okay? But what studies tell us is that isn't what happens. Actually, what subsequent studies tell us is that the CD57 will kind of oscillate up and down around a low level. And right at the end, if it is going to go up, I hope you heard that word, if it is going to go up, it'll shoot up right at the end of treatment. It's not going to go up right away, okay? All right, so what I have found is often it doesn't go up. And somebody can be doing quite well. They look great, okay? So there have been subsequent studies done, or actually not subsequent studies, my experience tells me, based on my practice, is that, so a number of my colleagues used to think that the CD57, if it was low, would determine that if you were going to relapse or not. The truth is we have no way. What I have found is that a CD57 does not predict any better, does not give me any greater prediction as to who's going to do an early relapse or who will not. The truth is in Lyme is that at some point, most people will probably relapse somewhere down the road, unfortunately. And the CD57 does not act as a good indicator. Even if it's normal, people will relapse, okay? So it's not a good indicator of when you're going to relapse, how long it is until you relapse. Are you going to be a frequent relapser, not a frequent relapser? It seems to have no indication of that at all. Therefore, I don't check it. If I've got my standard of when I stop treatment is if I've got somebody that I'm treating and they're either symptom-free for 2 months, I stop, or if they are doing quite well and they've been plateaued at a good level for about 4 months, and no matter what kind of changes I make to try to move things in a better direction, it doesn't matter, then I'm going to stop at that point too. Those two situations, I think, are the ways that you get at decreasing your chances of relapse, okay? The other thing that you want to do to decrease your chances of relapse, and I've got a whole article about it, is you want to make sure you get sleep. You want to make sure that you're exercising to tolerance, okay? You want to deal with emotional toxins so they don't beat down your immune system. You want to be on a good multivitamin. And you might want to take an herb or two to stimulate your immune system. You could either use transfer factors or you could use mushrooms, okay? I'll show you that article, but those are the things you want to do to prevent relapse, okay? And I give you the doses and exactly what transfer factor to use in the article. I'll show you that here in just a second, all right? But I wouldn't use CD57 as a guide on anything, actually. I just don't think it's helpful, all right? Let me go ahead and do a screen share. I'm going to show you a couple articles to take a look at so you understand a little bit more what I'm talking about here. I have here, there is one on test. Okay, and all right, so just to mention this earlier, there is a test, I call it the where am I in my treatment test, okay? So some people use that CD57 to see where are they in the treatment. Read this because I basically go through the reason I don't think there's any test that's useful to determine where you are. You have to go by your symptoms, okay? That also is mirrored in this other article. Is there a Lyme done test? No, there is not a test we can do to say that we're done with Lyme, all right? And then there is an article here on why I just am not a big believer or user of CD57s. CD57 tests rarely. Take a look at that. You'll see more detail about what I just talked about too, okay? All right, and then in the chapter called, what do I call it? I think I call it relapse prevention. Where is it? Oh, here it is. In this chapter called Relapse, take a look at this article called Finished and How to Prevent Relapse, okay? And that will give you details on how many hours of sleep, why exercise, how do you use mushrooms, how do you use transfer factors, which one do you use? It's all in that article, okay? So take a look there. All right, let me go back here. All right, here we are again. All right, thank you for that question, Donna. Let's see. All right, let's see. From Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer. Let's see. I am an old patient of yours. And still doing well. Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. You're welcome, by the way. I'm glad to hear that. Still trying to follow the Mito food plan or the Mito diet for long term. How many grams of carbs can you have about? Also, some people say you have to have at least 16 hours to fast 16 hours. Is that the new number or is 12? Okay, thanks. Okay. So everyone, let me just show you. I'm going to show you do a quick screen share so you know what I'm talking about. And then, Jennifer, I'm going to come back and answer your question. All right. So again, I like, in terms of factories called mitochondria, it tends to be low in sugar, so you're not feeding yeast, and it tends to be full of healthy vegetables, which give you the fuel and nutrients you need. Okay, that's why I like doing it. All right. Now, in terms of the diet, you can find it here in this chapter called Free Reads. And the diet is called, this article called The Best Brain Inflammation, Pain, Energy, and Detox Diet Ever. Yes, I speak with a lot of hyperbole about that, but I really do believe in the diet. Okay, now that diet talks about, think about that diet. So if you go read that diet, you're going to see I give you, I think there's 3 videos on that article. There's a bunch of information you can print off that gives you a really good guide to determining how many servings a day do you have of various proteins, fats, and a limited number of carbs. Okay. But one of the things that Mito Food Plan does, so it's the Mito Food Plan is a paleo diet that article is about, okay? And I got the Mito Food Plan from a group called the Institute for Functional Medicine. They, as part of that diet, propose doing intermittent fasting as part of that diet. And here's the reason to do intermittent fasting is if you fast, that causes the brain to make a chemical called brain-derived neurotrophic growth factor. And that helps promote nerve growth in your brains. Well, guess what? For people with Lyme who have a lot of neurocognitive issues, thinking problems, that's a good thing, okay? So what degree of fasting actually will kick up your brain-derived neurotrophic growth factor? Well, either 1 day of fasting a week, all right? That's a water fast, okay? Or you can do intermittent fasting, all right? And what intermittent fasting looks like is fasting for at least 12 hours. Some people propose you get more benefit by going 15 hours. I haven't seen 16 hours before, okay? But I will tell you, Jennifer, you're getting benefit at 12 hours. You may get a little bit more at 15, but the key thing is to get to 12 hours, okay? And you need to do that 3 times a week, okay? So how do you build it in 3 times a week? Well, you have your dinner at 5 or 6, and then you don't eat until 12 hours later, okay? There is your intermittent fast, all right? Another way to do it is eat your meal, skip breakfast, don't eat until lunch. There's your 15 hours, okay? So it is, but it's 3 days a week you need to do it. And again, that's going to help kick up brain-derived neurotrophic growth factor, okay? The other thing it does when you go into keto, that sends you into ketosis, which means your body really is burning fat, that helps promote weight loss too, okay? So if you happen to be somebody with Lyme that has really led to your weight going up, this is a way to help promote weight loss as well, too, that can be helpful for you as well, all right? In terms of if you need to start adding some carbs in, Jennifer, take a look at the various serving sizes they recommend for beans, legumes, grains. I would consider adding at least 1 serving a day in at this point. If you're further down the road and you're doing well like you are, I think you can add 1 serving, maybe even 2 servings a day, okay? I don't think you have to be as fully restrictive as you are in the beginning, all right? I hope that gives you, answers your question, all right? And thank you for that. And I'm glad you're doing better. All right, let's see here. Hello, Dawn. Let's see. Is Parkinson's Lyme curable? And if so, how? Positive Lyme, Igenix Lyme, babesia, bullseye rash, joint pain, weakness, headaches, migraines at base of head, movement disorder diagnosed. All right, so I guess I'm going to give you a number of comments here on that one. I'm just seeing if there was a second part. All right, so let me start with a comment. So a lot of times, so neurologists are great at trying to put people in a box. All right, so they have the MS box, they have the Alzheimer's box, they have the Parkinson's box. Okay, so these are all syndromes, and there's certain things you're supposed to have to be called that one syndrome or that syndrome. Okay, now these syndromes doesn't mean that we know what's causing them. Okay. So, and also sometimes when neurologists can't figure out what exactly to call it, they'll put you in the box that looks the closest, okay? So if you're somebody that has a lot of tremors, they will tend to call that Parkinson's when in fact, sometimes it's not the true kind of tremors that somebody gets in Parkinson's, okay? Or you don't have all the stiff looking face and the difficult walking that sometimes people with Parkinson's has. Just because you have tremors, sometimes they'll put you in that Parkinson's box, okay? All right, so if you meet full criterion for Parkinson's, that's a hard thing to treat. If you have tremors that are fully, truly not Parkinson's, that's a little bit easier, okay? So first of all, whatever you decide to do, make sure you're treating for Bartonella too. So anytime that somebody's got severe neurologic Lyme, assume Bartonella is part of it. It needs to be treated, okay? If there truly is Parkinson's here, I would consider IV antibiotics along with oral antibiotics to cover your Bartonella. If this is not true Parkinson's, I think you might try to just do oral antibiotics, of which I would do minocycline, which treats intracellular Lyme, spirochete Lyme, also as part of a Bartonella treatment. I would do rifampin, which is the major agent for Bartonella treats cyst Lyme. After you're stable on that, I might consider doing very, very high doses of oral amoxicillin, which is penicillin. High doses of oral amoxicillin can work as well as IV antibiotics, okay? And when I talk about high doses, I'm talking anywhere from 3 500 milligram pills 3 times a day to 4 500 milligram pills 3 times a day. Keep in mind when we use amoxicillin for throat infections, ear infections, we're talking using 1 500 milligram pill 3 times a day. Okay, so I'm talking very high doses. Okay, so that's called an antibiotic or an IV equivalent dose. If you want more information about what I just said with that, take a look at the article I've written in the Treat Lyme book, in the Lyme disease antibiotic article. And in there, I talk about IV equivalent treatments, okay, and what constitutes an IV equivalent treatment. But I would look at that. Okay, now, pure Parkinson's Lyme, true Parkinson's Lyme, meaning you really do meet all the criteria for Parkinson's. I think with IV antibiotics and treating Bartonella, there's a 25% chance of cure. Or getting a lot better, I should say, or getting symptom-free. There's 50% of people that will not get completely symptom-free, but will get major improvements in their energy, body pain kind of symptoms, okay? And unfortunately, there's about 25% of people we just can't help with treatment at all right? Now, if you're not true Parkinson's Lyme, that switches a lot of these tremors more into the Bartonella camp. And Bartonella is treatable about 90-95% of the time. So I give that kind of a situation a better outcome potential than true Parkinson's, okay? So you need to be clear, did your neurologist overdiagnose you or not? All right. They like to put people in boxes that they sometimes don't fit into, okay? All right. All right, everyone. And so, Don, I wish you well. And I'm sorry that may be some difficult things to hear from me, but you did ask the questions. I just want to make sure that I gave you that information. All right, everyone. So that is it for me for tonight. I'm glad you were here tonight. I enjoyed visiting with all of you. We had a pretty good crowd tonight, too. And here in a few minutes, I'm going to transfer you over. I'm going to transmit you over to the Treat Lyme site. And you're going to land on the page where you can sign up if you want to subscribe to the Treat Lyme book so you can read all those articles I was telling you about tonight. Also, when you land there, you can click the tab to sign up for next week's webinar as well, too. Tomorrow morning, you are going to get an email from me that has a link to the recording, and also we'll have a link to sign up again, too. I hope you all join me next week. Also, if you find these helpful, I wish that you would share either the recording link that I send tomorrow, share that with your friends, or just share with them that you found these webinars that are very helpful. And the more people that I can help, I look forward to helping as many people as possible. And you can help me with that by sharing the information that we do here. When I send out the emails inviting you, forward those on to other people that might get benefit from these as well too. Okay? All right. And again, when you keep in mind that when you subscribe to the Treat Lyme book, when I land you there here in a minute, you're supporting these webinars as well too. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.